As a preschool teacher, if you are finding yourself exhausted at the end of your teaching day because you've been managing all the classroom behavior issues instead of actually teaching, well, I think you're probably doing something wrong. But the great news is it's not your fault. We've got two amazing tricks to be able to help you add to your preschool day so that you can actually stop behavior problems before they even start. Welcome back to the Preschool All-Stars podcast. I'm your host, Joy Anderson, and I am joined today by my good friend, Deborah J. Stewart. She has had over 30 years in the early childhood education space. She has a master's degree in early childhood education, and she has spoken at the National Association for the Education of Young Children conference. She also created her own private preschool called the Children's Studio, and she created a blog to capture all of her teaching moments and be able to share those with the world called teachpreschool.org. She's also been running her own virtual preschool program for over a year and a half called Kindy Ready. Deborah, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This has been like a dream of mine to actually interview you because you were my mentor back in the day. I mean, we both started our preschools around the same time. I started mine in 2008. When did you start your preschool?
In 2009, right after you did. But I had already started blogging before I opened my preschool. So that's why we met earlier.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember like trying to find out because I didn't come with the degree of early childhood education and I needed to be schooled real fast. And so your blog was one of those resources that I immediately gravitated to. You provided such a wealth of information on how to teach students in a play-based, developmentally appropriate manner, following the NAEYC guidelines. And that was like, could I be quite frankly honest? Teachpreschool.org was like my preschool Bible. I was like always going there, finding out the best tips and tricks that you had. So thank you, first off, for being the resource for millions of women teaching their preschools.
Well, I absolutely love that phase. It was like a season of time where I was teaching every day, photographing, writing. You never sleep during those times. You're up 24 hours trying to, get it all online and then get up and teach again. But it was a season of time that I, too, was growing in my skills as a teacher. And for people who followed me from the beginning, saw that evolution of me teaching less play-based to more play-based over time and learning and experimenting with what that looked like and what that really meant, because it's kind of a mystery to us. Funny how that is. But you would think it's a natural thing, but we don't come into the classroom naturally understanding how to teach through play. So I learned, though, from that experience, watching my students, we're going to talk about behavior. People would ask me, Deborah, could you teach us about behavior? Could you do like tips on behavior? And I was like, I actually don't have any behavior problems. I don't really know how I could teach on that. And I realized that was what I needed to teach.
That's crazy. And I remember we were talking a couple days ago and you said so many people just keep asking you, okay, I've got this specific kiddo in my school, Johnny. I like to refer to all of my amazing children as Johnny. And it was funny because one time I actually did have a Johnny in my preschool and I had to tell the dad, this is not about your child. But let's say we have a Johnny or a Susie and we tend to look at the behavior issue itself and say, how do I fix this thing that they do, this act, this behavior, right? Instead of, whoa, back up. You were mentioning you don't even have behavior issues in the classroom. And you actually, and I was like, you have to teach on this, Deborah, because the two things that if we can instill these into our classroom and into our teaching philosophies from the foundational level, we won't have these behavior one-off experiences going on. So loop us in. What are these two things?
Well, I would say the first thing that you need to understand is that your job isn't to fix the children you teach. Your job is I want to get away from the word fix because we always want to fix everything. If the child is having a problem, we want to fix the problem. We want to fix the child. But our job isn't to fix the child. The job is to reach the child. In order to teach the child, we have to reach them, not fix them. And so that sounds a lot like, it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. And I get that, but it's that mental shift. If you look at this child and think, how can I reach you? Do I need to be more playful? Do I need to be more creative? Is my classroom fun? Are there things that you like to do here? That's the first thing, because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll walk in someone's classroom and look around, and everything is so boring that I would be a problem child in their classroom. I have a really short attention span. You need to know that. And so if I were to walk in someone's classroom and they didn't have things that I could touch and move and do and cut and color and glue, and I wasn't allowed to make a mess and I wasn't allowed to touch anything until you told me I could, you would find me being a troublemaker for you. And I actually think I was a pretty good kid. So our first thing is we have to think about children in terms of not fixing them, but reaching them. And what do we need to do to change ourselves and our own approach to best reach every child that walks in our door? I will say, though, there are going to be some children, we should put a side note here, that truly do have incredibly difficult, maybe home lives or situations that are not super simple just by changing a classroom environment. But I'm going to tell you, 99% of the classrooms I'm in there, that's not the case. You know, our definition of trouble is usually normal classroom behavior. You know, a child who's 3 is going to act 3. A child who's 4 is going to act 4. Your job is to create an environment that reaches a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, not expects them to be a 4 and a 5-year-old. So we got to start looking at us first instead of fixing the child. How can we reach the child? That's the very first thing. And if you're always doing that, always thinking about that, you're always going to be listening in and tapping into what will be meaningful to that child or to every child in your classroom. And you're going to grow as a teacher immeasurably. You will see yourself growing in a way you never thought you could.
Well, and like that was, I think, the key word there, not fix, but reach. How do we reach the child? And you mentioned, setting up your classroom for success, having things out, and not just having things out that the children are excited about, but you being okay and planning into your day the opportunity for them to explore everything instead of having everything regimented and, oh, we can't do that now. We're doing that in 20 minutes and things like that. I want to go back to your classroom for just a second.
Okay.
Because I remember specifically, I can see the pictures in my mind of your classroom with your blog. It was gorgeous. The photos you took, to be able to visualize what an amazing classroom looks like. So if you haven't already discovered Deborah's blog, you've got to go to teachpreschool.org. Like I said, this was my opportunity to see what a true preschool classroom needs to look like. Can you guide me through what are some of your favorite centers? Because they're so visual and there's so many things out. I remember your block centers just set up, there's so many fun things that they could create. What are some of your favorite centers?
Well, first I'm going to tell you a little secret that less was more. So when you saw photos, it may felt like I put a lot out, but I actually was constantly putting less out and being more intentional about what I put out. So one of my favorite centers was my math center. And I used to think I had to put hundreds of little math manipulatives and games and puzzles and things out. And it would just be all dumped in a huge tornado, right? And the kids weren't really getting anything out of it. But what we learned was over time is if we would put maybe one set of dice and one game and a few manipulatives out that went along with that, and we put that as the center and set it up for a week and let them learn it and play it and practice it over and over, they would get better at it, understand it better. I would take time to actually do it with them, maybe the first day or two, and then leave it. And then when I saw that they'd done it and they were starting to either lose interest in it, then it would be easier just to set out a new game with maybe a spinner now and some different manipulatives. And then you could actually maybe slide that game you already had over a little bit, still have it on the shelf, but now we're going to add a new game. So you're going to build over time and then eventually switch around where you're not going to have 100 games out at one time. I mean, you could if your kids really got it, but I wouldn't. But the thing is that not to have a ton of stuff out, but to have stuff out that you have you had a vision for, and then to take the time to show your children what that vision was. Don't just assume they get it. And half the time your kids probably didn't even see it, so you got to sit down with them, play the game. Then when someone comes to you and says, I'm bored, I don't have anything to do. Well, why don't you go over and play that game we played yesterday? Let me see you go try it. I bet you can do it all by yourself. Same with the science center. Same exact thing. I see so many people get stuck at the science center. But if you spent the first week of school, we put out vinegar, little bottled tubes of vinegar, baking soda, a jar of baking soda, and then cups and spoons and a tray. That's the center. And then we spent the first day as a group, everybody doing vinegar and baking soda experiment, showing them how to take a teaspoon and put it on the tray, do the droppers, everything they needed. And we went with them through it. And then for the rest of pretty much the month, because they liked it so much, we set that out. That was the science center. And anytime somebody wanted to go over and explore it, they walked over, they got their own tray out. Ultimately you're trying to get your children to do everything themselves. But the first day or two, you got to walk them through it. And then you begin to give them the freedom, because now they've got the framework to work with that material. And you could add maybe some liquid watercolor in a day or two, or you could change it up a little bit. But I found that what we tend to do is fill ourselves with as many things that we think are cool, that will keep the kids busy and they want to play with, and ends up being too much overwhelming for us, and it's overwhelmed for them, and that intention gets lost. So everything, doesn't matter if it's science. In the block center, my kids liked wooden blocks. I would put out different kinds of blocks. They would dump them and go back to the wooden blocks. Cars, animals, wooden blocks, and loose parts. That's all I needed. Anything else became a mess. They didn't play with it. And so we would work on building towers and building farms and they would get really good. So instead of a lot of stuff, use some intentional, like your key things. Find out what those key elements are the kids will play with, and then build their skill in using those key things by letting them have more time for practice. We get in a big hurry to add too much and change too much. And it causes behavior because your students you can't trust them in your center. So you either stop letting them use them, or when you do let them use them, you like control, you're like micromanage. Oh, you don't need to dump that. Just choose one. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, my pre-K boys want to dump all the cards out. And I was like, why do you feel the need to dump all the cards out? Because we can't see them in the bucket. Fair enough. As long as you'll put them back, you can dump all the cards. But I'm not going to put 100 other things out and let them dump all of them. So I'm going to put out what they really want and combine that with some key things that I want to see them try to think outside the box, like those loose parts. So we began to do it.
I absolutely love loose parts. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. One more thing was another fear of teachers is letting kids move things from one center to the other. What if they take the vinegar and baking soda over to the block center? Well, then you haven't done probably a really good job of really setting up your room that shows this is the area that you can play with. You can set the tone and set this. It's not about giving kids a free for all. You set the boundaries. You say, this is where we play with that. And when you're done, you can put it back. But if they end up with, let's say I put ribbons in the block center and they end up in the housekeeping center, am I going to be upset about that? It's as long as the play is intentional, it's constructive, they have a reason for their doing, I'm going to let it go. If I see the play starting to become just, I'm going to take the blocks over there and throw it at everybody, then I'm going to go back to, let's all sit down here before you play today. This is what Mrs. Stewart saw yesterday. And you guys, that's just not going to work. But does that mean all my kids are bad kids all of a sudden? Or that I have kids who are misbehaving? I have kids who are going to push the boundaries to find out what's going to happen. And that's part of their job. Your job is then to help them redirect and to find that ability and that goal of what's going to happen. I get it. You want to see what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen if you take the blocks and go throw them in there? You're going to be in big trouble. That's what's going to happen. But let's go back and let's put those blocks back where they go. And then I need to sit down with them and make block play fun. If that's what they're choosing to do, then I'm missing something in the block center, something that wants to keep them there, using the material the way it's intended. If they're wanting to take the vinegar and baking soda into the math center, then I'm missing something. Every center should matter and be interesting and intriguing. If you wear yourself out, don't wear yourself out on discipline. Wear yourself out on trying to make your classroom amazing. Then your discipline will start to be the last thing you're thinking about, because you're just like, look at these amazing things I prepared and I want you guys to get the most out of. And you're going to be working on teaching your children to be productive and constructive rather than battling them and trying to fix this problem.
Absolutely. So you talked about less is more, having less
Mhm.
in centers, being very intentional. You also talked about modeling what happens in that center. So let's come over and talk about what's over here. Let's play the game together so that way when, later you come to me and you say you're bored, I can redirect you into, hey, do you remember how we played this last time? You love that. Go try it out. I love that idea. And then, so of course, we're going to go back now to mentioning to reach the child. So let's talk about how we reach the child before we get into the second tip. But back to reaching the child, of course, setting up the classroom for success. And let's go back to that reaching the child, though. How can we find out what interests our students? Do we give them surveys beforehand? How do we involve the parents? How do we make sure that we know what this kiddo is so excited about so I can bring that into my classroom and engage that way?
Well, you don't. And you're not going to survey the parent because they're going to tell you Spider-Man is what their child loves to play with. And you are not going to put Spider-Man in your classroom. In fact, I'm going to tell you that on purpose, everything in my classroom was something that I figured they wouldn't ever get to play with at home. And that was intentional. If they had it at home, it didn't need to be in my classroom. What needed to be in my classroom are the things they wouldn't probably get to do at home. My parents loved to say when I'd send my kids home messy, which was every day pretty much, because we painted, we didn't, we broke every rule in the mess category. But my parents said, you know what? I don't care because I don't feel guilty not allowing them to do it at home because you let them do it at preschool. And so it was a partnership. And in that partnership, the parent understood that send your child with some clothes that you don't mind getting sticky and messy, because I'll allow my tables and my floor, I'm designed for that, to get sticky and messy and dirty, and your child will come home that way. And then we can dig up the worms in my yard and nobody's going to freak out that there's holes in the yard, right? Where at your house, that might not be so feasible. So parents so first of all, you're working in a partnership with parents of them giving you the freedom to teach in a way that's going to be compelling and interesting. And then second, as far as learning about the interests of your children, you're going to start by just observing. You're going to put something out, it's trial and error. And if something's not working, so the first few days, you also have to just know child development a little bit. And some of this is experience talking. I don't know that I could give you a step 1, step 2, step 3, but the first few days when a child walks in the classroom, they're on overwhelm. What seems so natural to you, for them, it's like either they're going to be overly excited or they're going to be overwhelmed and they're going to not want to try anything. Everything's going to not look fun. So you can't bank on that. You've got to give it a little time, introduce it, believe in what you have out, model it, and then begin to see. I had one little boy who said he would never play in blocks. Like, no way. He had no interest in blocks. But we had these really cool blocks that looked like castle blocks. I think that's what they were called, in a basket along with our regular wooden blocks. And one day he just sat on a counter and I had to pretend like I didn't notice, right? Because you draw attention and So he got his castle blocks out and he built this beautiful castle, and all the kids were like, that's cool. And they all wanted him to help them do it. All right. So what was his interest? His interest wasn't really in block building. It was in things that were beautiful. He liked so I learned to bring things in like gems and jewels. That was his personality. He liked things that were beautiful and add them to my centers. And so he would come to the math center or the life table, not because of any agenda I had, although my agenda would be under the radar. It was because I understood this is what captured his imagination or his attention and brought him to the table. So you're going to add or take away or modify over time by observing, listening, and constantly trial and erroring. You're not going to look at your children and say, I want you to do it this way. You're going to look at it and say, if this is the way they're going to do it, how can I make that work for all of us? What can I add or what can I modify to make that where we meet in the middle? I'm always trying to meet them in the middle. They're not in charge of my classroom, but I also want to make sure I meet them in the middle so that I can inspire them and capture their interest and keep them going. So I got to meet them in the middle so we can both achieve our goals.
That's awesome. Meet them in the middle, meet them where they're at, find out through observation what they're interested in, then bring that into your classroom. Okay, let's move into the second trick that we can add into the foundation of our philosophy of how children are going to learn best, as well as adapt it and put it into our typical day. What is the second thing we need to do on top of reaching the child? What is the second thing we need to do to be able to help stop behaviors before they even start?
Well, nobody's going to like this answer, but it is the only answer. And I'm going to tell you, hands down, if you overlook this answer, you will never get to the place you want to be. And that is building a relationship. You've got to reach your children through your environment, and then you have to build a relationship along the way. And if you do not build a relationship with your child, nobody wants to listen to someone that they don't think even really likes them or cares about them or can't roll with the punches every once in a while or take a joke or think they're cute or think it's funny when they do something raunchy. You know, I've had this one little guy and I would just watch him and I was like, you know, sometimes you're pretty funny. I mean, you're driving me nuts, but that was actually kind of funny, you know? So you have to find that place. When you find that place that you have built that relationship where they genuinely care about you and you care about them and you're building that, you're going to be given by the child lots of liberty to then boss them around. But if they don't think you like them and that you don't have that relationship with them, you're going to not be able to boss them around at all. All you're going to be doing is pushing them around and they're not going to listen to you. It's going to become a tug of war and you're going to lose because everything becomes a battle. So what you want to do is not only create an environment that you can direct their attention and get them engaged and interested in what you do, but create an environment where they also feel a part of your community and they generally know you care about them. And it can happen in so many ways. It can just be a matter of, I had one little guy that I was like, how am I going to get this kid to connect with me? I always thought I was pretty connectable, you know, and he just kind of had that guard up from day one and I wasn't expecting it. It can make your job no fun when that happens, you know? And so he walks in and you're just like, oh man, why do I have to put up with this crap? You know, I came to have fun and he's going to make it hard on me. But we went through about 3 weeks of him not wanting, like kind of sitting like this through every circle, through every conversation, like on his guard. If I gave him any attention, it got worse. And then one day I pulled out a puppet and he loved that puppet. And so he would talk to the puppet, not to me, but to the puppet. I'm like, the puppet's an intermediary for me. So, you know, we gradually got the puppet out and that began to connect. And then eventually we were able to remove the puppet and go directly to me. I'm the one voicing the puppet. I'll talk to the puppet, but he needed that to warm himself up to me. Once he warmed up to me, then we slowly began to just break the ice, whatever that ice was. And maybe it was, like, you know, touching him on the back was a no-no, but it began to be like, okay, after a while, you know, he needed me to be, intentional about building a relationship with him so that we could move past that part and begin to learn and grow together. But until we could move past that part, we were kind of stuck, you know, he could do so much and then we were stuck. That relationship in combination with reaching to teach, it's a combination, reach and relationship. Reach your children through relationship. So they go together, the two R's right there. And they're neither one quick fixes because I'm never going to tell you that the solution is to fix something, and fixing something, whether it's fixing a broken toy or fixing a broken child, is going to fix your classroom. What will, though, is figuring out how to reach your children through the environment and then reach them through the relationship. And so your relationships are critical from the minute they walk in that door. From the second they walk in the door, I've seen so many teachers who, you know, are so nervous. I think it's nerves talking more than anything. They're afraid that their children might get out of control. They're afraid that their children might do something bad. And so they overstep, making sure that it won't happen. And they set up rules and constraints and, you know, only two chairs at this center. And the third child comes and there's like, how many chairs? there's two. And I'm like, well, then scoot one over. You got a kid that wants to play? Would you rather argue with them or get him playing? Scoot a chair over. It's okay. You got everybody sitting in a circle, and you ask a question and they all blurt out the answer and they're excited, and all you can say is, I need you to raise your hand. I'm like, why? You got them excited. They're listening to you. They're talking to you. They're sharing in your joy. And you're missing out because you're too focused on control rather than focused on reaching them with your relationship and reaching them through all the great things you're going to bring to the table. So that would be my 2 tips. I hope that I didn't confuse you.
Oh, absolutely. No, reaching the child through the environment and through building a relationship with them, and let go of the control and have fun. Bring the fun back into teaching, right?
Exactly. You know, when I say let go of the control, if your control is getting in the way of you building a relationship, then you got your focus in the wrong place. Your control should come through the relationship as a result of the relationship. My students wanted to do what they desired to please me, but only because I had invested in a relationship first. I always said, if you don't invest in a relationship, then you have no right to discipline because you haven't earned it. You've got to earn the right to get them to want to be a part of your program and listen to you. And not because I tell you that, it's because they're telling you that. They're saying to you, I can't hear you right now because I don't feel a part of your community. There's something in my way. And so they can't say that, but you can see it. And so you have to, sometimes it's through the behavior. And I've had all kinds, from the kickers to the screamers but I've never had a discipline problem, because that's, even if they're doing that, every action a child takes, they're taking it to tell you, this is what I still need from you. This is what I need to learn from you. If I can't stand in line without keeping my hands to myself, you can yell all day long to tell me to do it, but there's something I still need to learn. I need to get better. So maybe we practice the skill. Maybe we find a way to make it more rewarding for the child. What is it that I can do to help you understand how important it is? And maybe we do more encouragement and more praise. You know, you are amazing today because your hands are by your side. I couldn't be more proud. Thank you for that. You know, what can we do? But again, the more we focus on behavior, the less we're going to focus on the true solutions. And that is relationships and environment. And if we got to recognize when we've gone too far on just I'm going to think of every trick I can and use every transitional game I can to control behavior. And then when it's not working because you're not playing your tricks and gimmicks, then you're missing out on the authentic version of classroom control. And that authentic one comes through creating a crazy cool environment that your kids come and they're not going to see that anywhere else. I got a secret to tell you. My teachers, I think I drove them crazy because they weren't allowed to hardly buy anything. If you couldn't find, because we had our standard stuff, but if you couldn't find a loose part to make it creative, it was wasted money. I mean, you really were. We'd buy these cool toys, and the kids, being a blogger, you get a lot of free stuff, right? I gave most of it away because the kids liked it for a day, and then they trashed it because it wasn't really interesting. But the other thing we never did is let them use like store-bought printables or pictures for the wall. We drew everything ourselves, or we wrote everything ourselves. We created this environment that was very much about, being like ourselves invested in the creativity side of it. And therefore you think through, it's so easy to buy a picture and throw it on the wall and then point to it and have your kids say the letters with you or whatever it is, right? And then you wonder why they're fighting with you because they're so bored. But if you had to have the kids do the same picture, and you'll say, okay, we need a weather chart. So I'm going to have you guys write. I'm not going to go buy a bunch of weather cards that have sunlight when I can have them draw the sun. The more invested they are, So I just my teachers were like, can I just print this? It would be a lot faster. And I'm like, nope. In fact, I was like, I'm going to get rid of the printer if you guys keep asking me this. You cannot print anything. So my point is that again, focus on relationships, focus on your environment. Through those two things, you'll be able to reach your children. And that's where you want to be. And as you reach your children, you will naturally see them be interested. Even the hardest child, it may take time, but you will see progress if you stay focused on those two things. And it will be more rewarding to you than anything else you've done. You will grow as a teacher. You will grow in your appreciation for child development and what children need from you. And you will become like the kind of teacher that everybody signs up and wants to have your class because you get it. Focus on reaching through environment and reaching through relationships.
Right there. That's it in a nutshell. So thank you so much, Deborah, for sharing that with us. You have switched gears a bit. You had your amazing children's studio, a local in-home private preschool since 2009. And then you actually transitioned to a virtual preschool well before a lot of the rest of us because you had moved. So you closed down the private preschool and then you opened up your virtual preschool while everybody else was still doing local. But tell us now, this program that you've created, tell us about Kindy Ready and why are you so passionate about it?
Well, Kindy Ready is kind of like my baby. It's my opportunity to do two things. So the first thing is to keep me sharp, through Kindy Ready. So I moved way out in the country. There's no opportunity where I'm at right now to start like my own preschool, and I'm not getting any younger. And I was like, okay, maybe I can switch a little bit and do it a little different. So the only thing I could think of was to do things virtually. And this is before COVID hit and all of these things. But so I began to create videos and tell stories and play, like set up my math center and do math as if I was talking to the child and still teaching. And so Kindy Ready. So we thought, well, let's create a site called Kindy Ready, and we will teach children. Any parent who wants to bring their child, we'll teach children just like as if they were in our classroom. We'll bring in supplies like we would use. I mean, I still have most of my supplies, and my classroom is still set up downstairs. It looks a little different because I have a concrete floor, but it's not as pretty as it used to be. But so we set up the supplies, we set up the environment, and then we teach the kids as if they were sitting right there in front of us. So Kindy Ready is my opportunity to continue to keep my skills sharp and then to, at the same time, teach young children that one of the things I used to get all the time is, Deborah, I wish my kid could be in your classroom. I used to get emails all that time because they would see my blog and they're like, I wish. And I'm like, you can. And then I would get emails from teachers saying, Deborah, I wish I could be a fly on the wall in your classroom. Well, you can, because we open Kindy Ready not only to kids, to our parents to bring their child in, but also to teachers. So we have a lot of teachers who come in and they may use Kindy Ready as a way for me to model what teaching looks like the way I do it. Or they might use it as, some of them actually have their students watch our videos and they use it as a way to supplement their curriculum, So in Kindy Ready, we have curriculum I've written as well as videos that I've presented. And then I have a few other teachers that I've known over the years that have joined me and they teach as well. So we have like our nature teacher and she teaches some nature classes, and we have different classes. We call them clubs, and the kids, you can just pick one. And then we have what we call our backpack lessons, and our backpack lessons are more traditional preschool where it's a theme, and you pick the backpack and it's all virtual, and inside the virtual backpack will be your lesson booklet that you can download and print, your video that you can watch Mrs. Stewart reading the story, a copy of what the story is in case you want to go get it and let your child read along with me. So the whole idea was for me to be able to open a virtual school and continue teaching and reaching and building my skills, and at the same time, hopefully making a difference, making early learning simpler for other people who are just starting out, or for parents who are at home, and giving them that guidance and that resources that they need to just keep going. So Kindy Ready is doing that, and we started it, and we're getting ready to open enrollment again. But we open enrollment for each session, and then we close it so we can focus our attention on the kids and the members, and then we open it back up for enrollment. So we're getting ready to open enrollment again, and then we'll close, and then we'll open it again for the next session. But what really pushed me, I wasn't really ready to open it this year, but what really pushed me is when COVID came, we'd already been working on it. This is something that we figured we would do forever, regardless of COVID. And because we love it, and it was a great opportunity for us to teach. My assistant and I, Miss Lauren, she taught with me in the classroom, and she still teaches with me. So Miss Lauren and I thought, well, we could just do this. And then COVID hit, and all of my students who were previously going to be in my live school, my real land school, we had moved away, so they had to go find other schools. And mid-year, COVID hit, and all their schools got shut down. So we just hopped on Facebook and told the parents, we're like, hey, if you want to finish out the school year, Miss Lauren and I'll finish it out for you. So we did all the lessons live that year, and we finished out their school year live. And that made us work a little harder to get the site ready, because we didn't have the site ready. So we just did everything live for them and finished out their school year. But we learned a lot, whether you're teaching online or you're teaching in a classroom setting, you're never done learning, and you're always listening and observing the children and finding out what works with them. So we still do a weekly live, but everything else is in the site and the live for our members. They can come. Sometimes they come, some kids come every week, some kids pop in once a month. But if they don't want to do the live, they just do the material that's inside the site, because we have so much. But that's Kindy Ready. I know that was a lot in like a really long time, but I just want to make sure you had a full picture. I just love Kindy Ready. Yeah.
Kindy Ready is amazing. I mean, I know we talked a couple days ago about like everything inside of it, to be able to have access to it anytime that it works for the parents, the clubs that you talked about, the backpack, the themes, being able to have access to quality online preschool education is phenomenal. And then to jump in weekly onto your lives where they can see the other kids interacting and having fun and truly just gain those social emotional skills and learn from you live. Like, it's phenomenal what you've put together. So where can our listeners go to be able to find out how to get into one of your Kindy Ready classes?
So all you have to do is go to kindyready.com, KINDY ready.com. Just go to kindyready.com. There's always a wait list. If we're not open when you happen to check in, just sign up for that wait list, and then we make sure we email everybody on the wait list first and let them know when the next opening is going to be. And then sometimes we even do like a little behind the scenes opening for people like your guests. We might do a little flash opening every once in a while just to support when we have new people who are coming our direction. But for the most part, we try to open on schedule each season, each semester. But yeah, kindyready.com is where you go and get on that wait list or sign up.
I love that. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us again. And everybody, if you're interested, go to kindyready.com. Thanks again, Deborah.
Thank you.